Hello and welcome to Truck Talk. I'm Tyler Christensen and I'll be conducting this interview on behalf of the MCIEF organization. Today I have with me Jennifer Nuest, who currently serves as the Business Development Manager for Nirvana Insurance, which she joined as employee number 8 in June of 2020. Jennifer has spent over a decade in the transportation insurance industry, mostly on the carrier side, but has a couple years on the retail side. So welcome, Jennifer. Thanks for taking the time to sit down with me today.
Thank you for letting me join you on this.
Absolutely. Hey, I want to start with an accolade. In 2018, you were named a top women to watch in the transportation by Women in Trucking. And I wanted to ask you a few questions about that and give you the opportunity to kind of share what that meant to you, as well as why you feel like it's important that we broaden and socialize what that means in our industry from a carrier, GA, and retail perspective.
Sounds great. Yeah, I had back in 2018, one of my colleagues suggested that my company nominate me as a 2018 Women to Watch in Transportation with Women in Trucking. To be able to be named as one of the top women to watch just meant a lot to me, because I'm always trying to look for ways to help lift women up in the transportation insurance industry and in the transportation industry. Because if we don't make an effort to do that, I always say I'd love the day when we're not talking about top women, we're just talking about people. But we have to make a cognizant effort to do that now to help lift women up to higher ranks within the industry. So it really meant a lot to me to be given that accolade.
Absolutely. You know, what an honor. For viewers out there, if you have questions about the Women in Trucking, Jennifer's contact information will certainly be listed at the bottom of this video. You can reach out to her so that she can talk about some of those opportunities.
Happy to.
Right, thank you. All right, so let's start a little bit about your experience. You know, you've worked in the insurance industry, both on the company and the retail agency side, you know, as you said, for 10 years prior to coming to Nirvana. You know, in what capacity did your previous jobs entail? Was it underwriting? Was it marketing? You know, you went from customer facing to the company side. So what did you prefer, and kind of what did that experience look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I spent the first decade of my career with protective insurance, primarily in sales roles. I also spent a career rotation in loss prevention, which I can tell you I wasn't super excited when they told me I was going to be doing it, but it ended up being one of the most valuable experiences of my career, to be in the shoes of loss prevention and do, loss prevention audits and helping with servicing. And it really taught me a ton about the transportation industry. Also, most of my career at Protective, our model was that submissions came into sales, and sales was the one that kind of pre-vetted all the submissions and then chose what underwriting would work on and rate and quote. So really, I was helping do that pre-qualification. Does this fit our appetite? Does the sales situation make sense? Does the pricing make sense to something we can get to, and interfacing with the agent in every respect of getting that opportunity to a quote. And a lot of times actually going out and presenting the quote with them. Part of my responsibility there too was that I did manage some of the legacy direct accounts. So I did operate somewhat as a producer, which gave me some very real experience as to what my producers actually went through with clients directly. So I really got a wide variety of experience during my time there. And then in 2019, I guess, or 2018, it would have been that I went to Hub. So it would have been 2019, sorry. So they were my agency partner, and they had a role open up for National Transportation Marketing Coordinator. And this was a completely new role to Hub. And the responsibilities included carrier relationship management and wholesaler relationship management nationwide. And I also spent most of my time coaching producers and marketers where to market business, strategy around that, what resources were available to them, and really helped a lot of carrier partners and wholesaler partners write more business with Hub while I was there. So it really gave me a great taste of being on the retail side. I tell people on the carrier side, you really don't know what it's like to work as a person at an agency until you've done it yourself. It is way more hectic and busier than you ever imagined. And so it was a great experience for me. As far as what I liked better, they both had their pros and cons. I love representing a single brand and helping coach producers to sell that product better. I really enjoy that. also on the retail side, what I really loved was I was so used to saying yes, no, maybe in regards to a single company. Whereas there, it was, okay, what company is this going to go to? Like, what company is going to do the best job for this client? So it's a totally different puzzle to solve. Both are super fun.
Yeah, 100% agree with you as far as, having that retail experience. Like you, I had a few years on that side of the industry. I've had the opportunity to serve on the retail side as well as the wholesale side and now the company side. And, being on the company side now, the benefit of having those experiences of putting myself in the shoes of another individual that's part of this transaction when we're looking at quoting accounts and getting loss control out in front of them, I think is a significant benefit because it is challenging. You're either customer facing on the retail side and you're trying to just select which companies and wholesalers do I work with, from going to a wholesaler of managing now relationships both up and down. What clients do I want to work with, as well as what companies do I want to pursue based on their needs. And then you get to the company side where now you're working with multiple partners that are bringing you risks from a plethora of states. And I found that my experience has contributed greatly to my role today. And I wish a lot of others would kind of pursue that, because it is true that I think most of the time you find that someone prefers one or the other. For, like you said, there's pros and cons to both, but it's kind of a good sabbatical. I wish we could send some of our underwriters out into the field for 6 months.
Maybe we can convince the people in this industry that we should start doing sabbaticals to our partners or something like that. Would be a great way to just walk a mile in another person's shoes, because I know I highly valued the experience I got from doing that.
I agree. I'm sure there'd be some retail agents out there that would say, I'd love to come and underwrite too.
Oh yeah, just give them the pen, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right. So next question, how did you get connected with MCIEF? Did you already have the relationship with MCIEF when you were at Protective?
Yes.
Did this begin with your time at Hub? Do you hold your TRS designation?
Yes, I do hold my TRS designation. I first got connected with MCIEF at Protective. They actually had Tommy Ruke come in and do the motor carrier 1 and 2 classes. And we probably had around 40 people participate in those. And it was great because it was a mix of sales, underwriting. There might have even been some claims people in there, if I remember right. So it was a great educational experience for all of us as a whole. And then I decided I wanted to go on and get my TRS because of some of my agency partners that had one and were very complimentary of the experience. Obviously, as a licensed producer, I needed CE, so it made a lot of sense. I went down and did the advanced underwriting class in Phoenix. And it's funny, I made relationships at that class that I still hold today. So I actually met some folks from Amwins that are in Indianapolis as well, in Phoenix instead of Indianapolis, where I'm based. And they ended up being my partners for a little while I was at Hub. So it's just kind of crazy how these connections through MCIEF can bloom. And I continued to be involved when I was at Hub. And now Nirvana was already a member when I joined, which I was so thrilled about because I really value being part of MCIEF. There is no better way to network within this industry, I think, than MCIEF for transportation insurance professionals specifically.
Yeah, I agree. Certainly I've talked about this in previous interviews, but I think the probably the most significant outcome of the MCIEF conferences specifically is the networking. It's one of the only conferences in our industry that is entirely transportation focused. So I'm glad to hear that story about some of the connections you made. Also glad to kind of hear that you have your TRS designation. I think that oftentimes those of us that have been in the industry for many years but don't have our designation and are thinking about pursuing it think, well, I've been in the industry for a long time, so why do I need this, or what would the benefit be? So what could you say to viewers about, you've been in the industry, let's say 5, 10, 15 years, but you don't hold your designation? What would you say for words of encouragement, from the benefits that they could still achieve at this point in their career by moving forward with those classes and actually obtaining the designation?
Right. First of all, I would say you have to get CE somehow. And guess what? Every class for the designation counts for CE. So why not do that, first of all? And second of all, you know what? It helps the brand of TRS. And I hear complaints from producers about, people that are out in the marketplace that don't know what they're doing and they're running up and competing against them. So if you want to hold something out there as a brand to help people know who they should be working with, TRS is obviously a great consistent thing that we have. And it was agencies that really started it. So why not participate? It's not that difficult. If you know trucking so well, it shouldn't be hard to achieve. So why not do it and knock out your CE?
Absolutely. All right, let's hear a little bit about Nirvana. You've been with Nirvana now since 2018. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing, what you're building, and then tell us a little bit about how you feel that your MCIEF, either relationships or classes you've taken, or even, I guess, going through the TRS designation courses have kind of helped you in your current position.
Right. So, yeah, I joined Nirvana last June. I'm really excited about what we're building here at Nirvana. So, we've really taken a more tech forward approach to insurance. And I would say, I was just really excited about the mission that we really center around making fleets safer. And we know they need financial incentive to do so. And what better financial incentive than lower insurance premiums for driving more safely? So I really, that mission appealed to me so much, and the impact I could have in us doing things differently in the industry. So that's when I decided to join. And I think my involvement with the MCIEF and my education, it first of all helps my company because a lot of our people have never been in transportation insurance before. So they lean on me for some of that transportation knowledge, as well as our agency partners and other employees of Nirvana that have been in the industry for a while. So that's really important. And I think, too, what really helps is I am back to working with agency partners again. So obviously, MCIF is a great way to connect with potential agency partners as we expand across the country. And I can then have a comfort level that these are people that are dedicated to being educated about transportation insurance and be more willing to take chances on people maybe that have some less experience, but are very enthusiastic and willing to learn. So that's, like I said, I really see it playing in a lot of the time in my work.
Absolutely. And I love to continue to hear how you're an ambassador for MCIEF and continue to promote that within your own organization, but as well as the partners that you're working with. So you mentioned safety, and I want to talk a little bit about how we're seeing some changes in safety and potentially the need, but also the benefits of technology surrounding safety. How do you feel that technology has transformed kind of safety, and how do you see it affecting the future?
Right. I think it's amazing the data we can see now with the telematics that are tied with ELDs, the camera data. We're having a lot of smart cameras that are collecting even further data points than the telematics. But here's the thing, you can see what those drivers are doing habitually. So they're harsh braking, harsh turning, speeding. You can compare that. So you know the true risk of a driver. Because I tell you what, the thing we've been finding at Nirvana is that doesn't always line up with the traditional methods we've used to assess people, which are MVRs and basic scores. There's a lot of, disparity in that system. And part of it is that's when they're getting caught doing something wrong. So technology that we have today can actually show us, are they doing a ton more right than what they're doing wrong? And also, where are they going? What areas are more hazardous? And also, can we target coaching around those areas? Can we route around some troublesome areas? I see there's so many ways that we can truly impact safety, because how many times do you talk to a fleet that they're like, oh, well, there's this way station, we get caught out all the time, or Indiana, they're always going to pull you over for speeding so they can get in a roadside inspection. Well, this is the chance to truly see what their behavior is, which I think is just an incredible opportunity. And I'm just really excited to see where the industry goes when people understand better how to use that data to improve safety in their fleet, which a lot of them are doing through coaching. But how do we help the smaller fleets understand how to do that? Especially, we've seen the explosion of new DOT numbers. And so how do we make sure those people are starting off on the right foot, because they get to start with technology that the legacy companies didn't have when they started?
Right. Yeah, you said a few things that I want to highlight and circle back to. The first piece is that I think the data driven approach is data decision making is going to be key in the future. It tells the story, good and bad. The second piece to that is, I think it's important to highlight that the technology changes that are occurring in our industry are beneficial to not only the customer, but the companies. It allows the companies and the wholesalers, the retail agents to assess accounts better. It eliminates the ambiguity, but those pieces like drive cams, how can the insured better manage his drivers, but also how can the company better protect that insured in two ways. One, it allows us to see what truly happened in that accident. So as a carrier individual, was our driver at fault? If he was, it allows us to handle that claim quicker because we know what truly happened. We don't have to wait on a police report. If payment is warranted, then we can get payment issued and we can move on down the road. We don't have delayed claims time frames to spend additional dollars that could ultimately affect the insured's loss ratio increasing rate because we're having to wait on that discovery. As well as it helps the insured, defend a loss. There's often cases where it is a not at fault accident, but without a camera, that's not always the case when you review a police report. So, I think that we all have to continue to lean into technology, lean into the data, and I'm excited to certainly see where it's going in the future.
Likewise, I think the thing that I think it really introduces is better fairness across the board. So how can we deal with people more fairly and be more collaborative with them
Right.
and truly making the road safer?
I agree. Well, we'll take it one step further when we talk about technology. These days we continue to have questions, at least internally from a company perspective, as to how our autonomous vehicle is going to change our industry versus manned trucks. But I certainly want to ask your opinion, and how do you see this affecting the industry?
Right. Obviously, I think a lot of us wonder, well, hey, are we still going to have a job? But as I say, hey, if the road's safer, I can probably find something else to do. But I think the thing about autonomous trucks that I find so fascinating is the AI and how it's being developed. Right now, the government hasn't really stepped in with a lot of standards around that. So, when I've heard talks from people at different manufacturers that are developing these technologies, there's different ways to program the AI. So I think, if there's not going to be standards, how do we learn to underwrite? Because I think it becomes more of a product liability than, that human factor. So, for example, does a company prioritize the safety of the driver above all else, or do they prioritize the safety of the people around the vehicle? So I think there's some questions that haven't been answered that well. And, those are things that I think we'll have to consider in underwriting because they will impact the losses, much the same we evaluate a driver and try to evaluate their behavior.
Right. No, I agree. And I think we have some time. I think there's many things that still continue to have to be worked out, not only from the manufacturing perspective, but, from a legal perspective, operating environment, et cetera. But certainly it's up and coming. All right, well, let's go to a fun question. What's the craziest claim that you've ever dealt with?
Oh man. As you know, with insurers, there's always interesting situations. So there's probably a lot of different ones I could talk about, but I'll talk about one that I think is an interesting story. So I would work with entertainer coach operations early on in my career. And as you can imagine, that it's kind of a different dynamic working with them. And one of my clients had a driver that it was just the driver, and I'm not going to mention who it was, but it was a celebrity on board, and they're driving along on the highway, and a guy comes into the highway and he hits the guy and kills him, which obviously very somber situation. But, turns out this guy had multiple, been picked up a bunch of times for being an obstruction to traffic and drunk and disorderly type stuff, so, when looking at dealing with that they got the driver home, and that driver, they talked through what happened, and the driver said, well, I'm not going to drive anymore. And the owner said, I really hope you'll reconsider. You did what you should have. If you had swerved, you might have, also injured or killed both yourself and people on board in addition to this man, and I really want you to consider it because you're a great driver. And he said, no, no. And then he goes to leave. And the owner says, well, how are you getting home? And he said, well, my truck's out here. He said, I thought you said you weren't going to drive anymore. And he said, well, and he said, you realize that could have happened in your truck. And it caused the driver to reconsider. And he ended up going back and driving. And as you may be familiar, these entertainer coach operations, a lot of times these drivers are going out on long tours. So he went out on a month-long tour. And at the end of that year, the drivers got a vote on a driver of the year at that company every year. And it was that driver that was chosen. Wow. So I just, obviously when you're dealing with public transportation, I feel like those claims are even crazier because your cargo is people. And that's just in my mind, because it was crazy with, some of the press around it and stuff like that. And then this driver and how the owner handled the situation with him. It was just a really positive story in the end.
Yeah, it is. Did you ever have the opportunity, you have to name names, to meet any celebrities when you were working with the entertainment book?
I did not, but I will say I did get to go on some of the buses and see what they were like when I would tour the facilities. And, a lot of times they'd share interesting tidbits. One of my favorite tidbits was one told me that the Beastie Boys, one of their buses, they had to install extra lighting because some of them like to read. So one was like more the party bus and one was more the chill bus, or they would share little tidbits like that I thought were really fun. But at the end of the day, they operate so much like any other bus or truck company, with their certain little nuances around, some of the security around what, and discretion because of who they have on board.
Right. Yeah. How do you value that cargo, right?
Yeah.
All right, so you talked a little bit about earlier, we're going to go back to your protective days and bringing Tommy Ruke in to facilitate certain classes. There's a key part to this question, which always makes it the most challenging, but in just a few sentences, how would you describe Tommy Ruke?
I can describe him as an institution in this industry. I just think he's one of those people that I appreciate how much he's given and this organization he helped form, because I just see all the relationships that get built out of this. And I would just say he's an institution. We all have our Tommy stories, about pickles and cucumbers and, the beer hauler with the alcohol exclusion and the policy. So I feel like those little tidbits also kind of unite everyone that's been in MCIEF. So I would just say an institution that has created something really great in our industry.
That's right. I love that. And you're right. We all have those stories. I think it's important that we continue to have those stories as we bring in new facilitators. We're just getting ready. If you're viewing this today and you're not familiar with MCIEF or the conferences that we host, we are for the first time hosting a West Conference this year in Phoenix in May. And so if you're interested in that, you can certainly find more information on our website. But there are common stories that continue to be told by Tommy and associates that you don't want to miss. All right, let's go back a little bit more and talk a little bit more about the past. So what's one thing about the trucking insurance industry that you wish you had known maybe 5-10 years ago that you know now?
I'm going to circle back to what I said about the telematics. I think I wish I could have appreciated the insight that telematics could truly give us. I did work with in situations where we were trying to figure out how are we going to use this data in the future. And I think, my sights probably weren't as high as they could have been of the possibilities. And I think the telematics insight as far as driving behavior is really going to change this industry quite a bit from that old mentality of reviewing MVRs and SMS scores and a bunch of data that you're just making assumptions instead of actually seeing what the data truly is.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, so if we talk a little bit, I want to continue to encourage viewers to engage with MCIEF, to want to learn more about MCIEF. Certainly, if you're not a current member, or do not hold a TRS designation, which we talked a little bit about. So let's talk about, What doubts, objections did you possibly have to joining MCIF in your early days? If you didn't have any doubts, how do you see how it's evolved? What was it then versus what is it now?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I really didn't have much doubt, except, you're in the insurance industry and there's all these different education things, and some are better than others. So maybe that was the only thing I questioned. But once I got involved, I really saw the value in it. And it's really incredible to me to see where it's evolved to, because really when I started out doing it, I don't know that the truck stop webinars, maybe they were doing those, but just to see the things like the truck talks and all the resources they put out, and just how much it's grown. There's so many people attending. And the thing that I think is really promising is to see how many people are trying to get into the industry and they start with MCIEF. Whereas I feel before, maybe you didn't see as many entrants, especially on the agency side. Obviously, it's
Right.
much easier to start an insurance agency than an insurance program or carrier. So it's really, I just love all the involvement that I'm seeing across the board. Has been, I think it just keeps getting better and better.
So I like what you just mentioned about, the up and comings, but talk about the experience when you go to a conference of ours for MCIF and you see your competitors. You talked about networking, but
Yeah.
I'll certainly add on to your comments. But what's your experience when you go into this type of environment, and what's it like seeing your competitors?
Right. What's really interesting about this, so I'm a person, maybe you can tell this, but I'll talk to about anybody. So I've always thought it's nice to have friends in the industry, whether they're your competition or your partner. And I would network with people at MCIEF that worked for wholesalers, that worked for carriers. Some were direct competitors, some weren't. And what was really funny is when I went to Hub, they would start copying me in on emails with different people, and they would pause and be like, why is she on that email? And then they'd notice it was a Hub email address. And so what was really neat is I got to jumpstart a lot of relationships on the Hub side because I already knew these people
Right.
primarily from MCIEF. So that was really cool that I didn't have to do the getting to know you step. We could just get into business and, hey, how's the kids doing? Or, whatever hobby they're into, or, whatever I know about them. So that was really helpful. And then coming back to more the carrier side of things again and working with retail partners, this past conference I attended in October, it was a great way to reconnect with a bunch of agency partners I had known and worked with in the past. So my advice is it's great to talk with your competition. I think their competition is who makes you better. If you don't have competition, I don't think you're as driven to improve things. But they also can be your friends. And sometimes you can say, hey, well, what's your experience with this partner? And, sometimes you find some commonalities there. So I think it helps everyone to have friends in the industry. It makes all of us better.
I agree. And I think that's kind of the overarching umbrella of the MCIF conference is the competition to an extent somewhat stays at the door. We're all there to learn from each other, share our experiences. Competition is certainly healthy, and we all like some good competition, but it's a learning environment. And I would encourage those to continue to foster those relationships with their competitors, because like you say, you never know where somebody's going to end up.
Right.
I've had many friends that were competitors that are now working with me from a wholesaler perspective, or have moved to the retail side, or vice versa. We've worked with agency producers that now work for us as a carrier or work for a competitor. So you never want to burn those bridges. Totally.
I think too, you can probably agree with, we're in such a weird niche that people that are not in our niche really never truly understand your problems and how work is and things like that.
Right.
So it's great to be around people that truly understand.
I agree. All right. Well, we've talked a lot about the MCIEF conference. Again, today's discussion with Jennifer was intended to learn a little bit about her, learn how MCIEF has certainly contributed to her career, but also market some of our upcoming events. So we'll list those again. We have the May conference in Phoenix for the west side of the nation, as well as our annual conference in October in Florida. If you have any questions, certainly access our website. The link's going to be below. If you have any questions, you can certainly reach out to either myself or Jennifer as current MCIEF members and TRS designees. But any closing comments, Jennifer, that you may have for our viewers today about the benefits of MCIEF or what you could promote about this upcoming May conference that we're hosting for the first time this year?
Right. I will say I'm really excited to see that involvement on the West Coast as well, since I know it's a long ways to get to Orlando. So I think it's great that there's going to be 2 conferences, and now I'm trying to decide which one I go to because each are easier for me to get to. And I just highly suggest get involved and make some new friends. I think most people at MCIEF are very approachable, so do not hesitate to introduce yourself to people you don't know when you're there, and get outside your circle and make new friends, make new partnerships, and be more successful because of your involvement at MCIEF.
Excellent words of advice. All right. Well, again, on behalf of MCIEF, I'm Tyler Christensen conducting today's Truck Talk interview. We thank you, Jennifer, for your time today, and I look forward to seeing you at our next conference.
Likewise.